So I saw when Nile Rodgers was producing David Bowie. You know, I saw when Queen and Bowie were singing the vocals to Under Pressure. I saw when the E Street Band were in there, or Chic or Diana Ross or Madonna or Devo. You know, I mean, it was the Rolling Stones.
You didn't come from a musical background, you know, so you kind of, you developed your love for music through, what was it, AM radio, just tuning in?
Yeah.
Listening to the bands?
Yeah.
What kind of stuff were you listening to?
You know, someone asked me that question just an hour ago, and I can't be as witty as to tell you honestly and openly what it was I was listening to, but it would have been what was on the top 40. Because you're talking about pre-teen years. But the first time you heard a catchy song on the AM radio in America, it would have been on top 40 radio. Sure. Casey Kasem doing the countdown.
Legendary.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is in the documentary as well. The fact that you may not have got a record contract without radio.
Perhaps that's true. You know, I had sent Runaway around to any manager, any label. At that time, in that era, you would handwrite a note. And if you didn't have representation, like some big shot lawyer, you were just a nobody kid trying to make it. And I was a creative thinker. And there was a new radio station. It was so new, they didn't have a receptionist. And fortunately for me, that was the case when the DJ who was on the air said, shush, wait outside that window. And the program director who came out and said, what are you here for? And I said, listen to this song. And they said, that's a hit song. I said, I know. You know, and nobody else would listen to me. But fortunately, that station was owned by a chain of radio stations.
Okay.
And then 8 major cities in America was playing Runaway before there was a record deal.
That's huge.
It was.
That's great. So guys, how did it feel looking back at it all to make this documentary? I mean, was it, I don't know, from your perspective, I guess, was it therapeutic? Was it a struggle?
I don't think it was necessarily a struggle. It was emotional. When we, the band, got together during a rehearsal and had a rough cut maybe 6 months ago, it was emotional because it's been such a roller coaster ride. And I know that, you know, I cared enough watching it about the guys, you know, and that they believed in me and it. And 40 years later, everyone who's contributed along the way is why we're here today.
And what did you learn about? I mean, there must have been a few surprises
Aside
for
from
you.
him being a hoarder. Not only is Jon a hoarder, but some of his band members, it turns out, are hoarders as well. So there was personal archives. Then, you know, the band came onto the scene at the same time MTV was sort of coming onto the scene. And then VH1. And so much of it was documented. And then you just have all the band members, except for Alec, unfortunately, who passed away, contributed. Mm-hmm. So you had great interviews, great storytelling. So really it was just... And then you had this ongoing story of Jon, you know, because we met in year 39. And yes, looking back at the 40-odd years was an amazing saga. But there was also this real-time story and this uncertainty in the future. So you had a lot of threads to pull. And all I needed was time, you know, to really make sense of this. But I mean, this is a dream. This is a dream for a filmmaker to have all of those elements.
And were you back in touch with Richie during the making of the show?
Well, eventually, because he sat down for a couple of interviews with Gotham. But when the rough cut was then put together, that's how I said it was the last time I'd seen it cut. He did come to my house and we watched the first 3 episodes, just the two of us. Late into one night.
And how was that?
Fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, I think that there's so much misinformation in the marketplace. When he quit the band some 11 years ago, I mean, it's literally probably this week, to be honest with you. 11 years ago, he just, you know, for a number of reasons, substance abuse, anxieties, you know, being a single parent, all these things were weighing on him. And he literally didn't show up for a show. And subsequently, we had 80 more shows on that tour. So it's been 11 years now. It's a long period in time. And so he participates in the doc and talks about, you know, how it is that he quit and apologized for the way he quit. But there is no animos. There is no animos.
Yeah, because you two are you were family, you were brothers.
The band were all that. So like I said, what's really important for everybody to understand is there was no animos, and every contribution by anybody along the way is what got us here today.
I didn't know about the Springsteen thing with Bruce jumping up on stage with you one night.
who would? It's not like we made a living talking about those things. Southside Johnny produced my demos when I was still in high school. So remembering that those guys who were such an influence on me when I was a boy, there were 10 members of the Asbury Jukes. There were 7 members of the E Street Band. So literally those bars 25 miles south of my house, you would run into one of them on any given night. That's 17 different guys that were as close to being Santa Claus to a young boy as humanly possible.
I mean, it was a perfect example of just the richness of the archive, because John told that story about doing the cover of the Springsteen song, and then Dave corroborated it. And John said, by the way, I think there's some archive out there. I don't have it. It's one of the few pieces he didn't have, but there's something out there. I've seen it. That turns into now like a treasure hunt. My team, the archival team that we built, determined to find that needle in the haystack.
I mean, you spoiled us. It's so rich with
it's incredible
with footage. There's so much. And Bruce, you got Bruce to be in the show.
Yeah, sure, and Southside.
That's great.
Yeah, we didn't want this to be a talking heads piece either.
Yeah.
We decided early on it wasn't appropriate to have a bunch of people talking about our accomplishments, but 2 guys that were integral to my childhood were Bruce and Southside.
That's great. And I love that you take us back to the whole Powerhouse era as well.
Power Station
era in New York, which is just, that place.
That was history.
If those walls could speak, right?
It's now owned by a university.
Yeah.
But yes, the Power Station was, probably as famous as Abbey Road, in its moment in time, for the legendary records that were made there, and some of which were made during the time when I was the gopher. So I saw when Nile Rodgers was producing David Bowie. I saw when Queen and Bowie were singing the vocals to Under Pressure. I saw when the E Street Band were in there, or Chic or Diana Ross or Madonna or Devo. It was the Rolling Stones. It was unbelievable.
Did you get that feeling then that people would probably get when they meet you now of being, very starstruck and
I was in
having
awe.
A whole ton of respect for
the crazy memories that I have. I remember once standing up on the roof and looking over 53rd Street, just, sort of running away from my responsibilities and staring over the roof. But what I saw was Bob Dylan walking down the street carrying a guitar case. I mean, that was very, surreal. And there's Bob Dylan walking down the street carrying his own guitar, walking to the studio. And you're thinking, wow, there's a moment in time. Or the Rolling Stones, holding the door open for me and my little band of friends that were coming in from a rehearsal and making small talk, and things like that I tell you what, it would have been cute now to say, remember that little kid, it grew up to be me. Pretty cool stories.
I wonder if they do say that.
Some of them, sometimes I've crossed paths with Mark Knopfler.
Yeah, sure.
Was making Love Over Gold and needed to borrow a copy of Making Movies, and they were going to send someone out for the vinyl. Mm-hmm. And I said, I have it, and I have it here. And you can borrow it if you sign it. And we both were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the same year. And I showed that album cover that I still have, to say, we're both being inducted into the Hall of Fame together. And I'm a fan.
Absolutely. Hey, I've got to ask, how's the voice? Because
it's getting there.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say we're good, but we're getting there. What you see in the film was shot 1 year and 2 years ago. So I'm well on the road to recovery. I've had this massive reconstructive surgery, which was a surprise to me. But I'm well down the road to recovery.
I mean, how was it having to deal with that while there were cameras there? And, how was it for you guys?
Sucked.
It was great for me. It sucked for him. I mean, look, I knew from the start that, sure, there's one version of this that's just a retrospective.
Yeah.
But this, the stuff that you guys have been talking about, that superhero stuff, it's just incredible. Every great superhero has a great origin story. So it is amazing. But the stuff John was going through while we were filming it was the human stuff. That was relatable. Just watching somebody try to get back to the place they love.
Cry.
Yeah.
Suffer.
I pushed my way into those rooms, those dressing rooms. He kicked me out a few times.
Okay.
And then I would quietly slide back in.
Yeah.
I knew from the start that was the thing that was going to help this stand out.
So we get many musical memories. There's probably only a handful of songs in pop and rock history that everyone knows the words to and everyone will sing along to, and that are guaranteed to put everyone in a good mood. And there's a great moment where you're sitting in the studio listening to the playback of Prayer. And who said it wasn't going to be a hit?
Well, I certainly on the day that we wrote it, I absolutely positively thought, yeah, it's good, it's fine, who cares? It's just another good song to put on the pile. It was when we went to rehearsal that it took on a life of its own, because we were aware that we needed to develop a line, and we were thinking of Sugar Pie Honey Bunch and like Motown stuff like that. And so we knew it was in mind, but on the day we wrote it, on a stand-up piano and an acoustic guitar, although the lyrics and the melodies were intact, we left there with that. I would venture to say, and I have two other witnesses that would have to corroborate this, I don't know that we had the key change on the day. I think that came during the practice, during the pre-production, during the rehearsal. I don't see how we could have said, and then it should be a key change. I think that probably came in that same rehearsal when we worked up that bass line. And Tico came in and you went, there's something unique. But a young man at 24 would say, of course we should go to the key change. The 62-year-old sits there and goes, no, don't do the key change.
Thanks, by the way, from a UK perspective for throwing in the final Wembley shows.
Right.
At the old Wembley.
The old Wembley.
That was great.
Remember, now it's probably often forgotten, but we were then meant to open the new Wembley. We had sold a couple nights out, and the construction of the stadium was not done. If you remember correctly, it didn't open for like another year. And they had to relocate that 2 stadium fulls of people out to Milton Keynes. So for years, I was very upset with Wembley. I didn't go back there until 2019 as a result. But, closing the old one, having been meant to open the new one, would have been really historic. But all our memories in the old one, and even the new one now, are fantastic.
Will you come back and play?
Definitely.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I remember doing it in 19 and going, wow, sorry I was mad at them for so long because it's a great stadium.
So, new album.
Yes.
Out in June.
Yes.
Forever, lead single. I love the lead. And it's kind of a tribute to your wife.
Yeah, it is. I now, from my childhood, of course, the reference for those who will know, Van Morrison, Brown Eyed Girl, but the Brown Eyed Girl in this song and in the storyline is Dorothea, because she still believed in me when I was going through this whole process of the surgery. And I jokingly, as we were writing it, I said, of course, it says Sweet Caroline, and we all sang along. No, it should have been Living on a Prayer, but you can't be that. You have to be self-deprecating at some point. But so, Sweet Caroline is the example of that. But the Brown Eyed Girl believed in me was obviously Dorothea, yeah.
50 years in rock.
Jeez. Crazy.
Gone by in the blink of an eye.
It does.
Thank you, Goodnight. The Jon Bon Jovi Story.
Well, the band story.
The band story. Out on Disney Plus on the 26th of April. Guys, what a pleasure. Thanks for coming.
This was a joy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Us.
This is gold.